I'm going to turn this over to the real program. You're not here to listen to me, you're here to listen to them. So they were instrumental in putting together the boy with the leaky boot, or bringing it back from Wadsworth. I'm not going to take the wind out of their sails. I'll let them tell the whole history, and then I'll interrupt them when they're telling it wrong.
It's just like Roger, if we don't know, we just make it up.
All right, well, go ahead. I don't know how you're setting this up. Dan Freeman.
We don't need those stuff.
And Tom Stugmyer.
Hello, my name is Dan. I work for the City of Wadsworth. Some of you know me, some of you don't. I've lived here pretty much all my life. My family goes, yeah, my family goes back 9 generations in the state of Ohio. So I'm back from Native Americans all the way till now. It's kind of a funny story the way the statue came about. Being that I work for the City of Wadsworth for the street department, the first year that Mayor Lawbaugh got elected, she made a tour of all the departments, and they didn't know what to do with her when she got to our department, so they put her with me. So some people saw her out with me shoveling snow. We cleaned all the crosswalks at the schools. So I get to ride around. Of course, I'm trying to watch my language and be somewhat cordial. And I just told her, I said, I know you just got elected and you're not thinking about running for re-election, but did you know that if you run for re-election and get re-elected, you'll be the mayor during our bicentennial? And there was a brief pause, and she says, Dan, I don't want to appear to be stupid, but when would that be? And I said, well, that would be 2014. So about 3 years after that, 2-3 years after that, the city's health fair, I hear, Dan, from across the room. And I look over, and there's Mayor Lawbaugh and her husband, and she said, I need to speak with you. And I'm like, oh gosh, what did I do now? So she said, do you remember what you said to me 3 years ago? And I said, enlighten me. She said, you told me that if I ran for re-election and it got re-elected that I'd be the mayor during the bicentennial. And I said, yeah, I remember that. And she said, well, that never left my mind, and I'm thinking that we've got about 2 years left. We ought to get started on it. And she said, I thought maybe you might like to be involved. And I said, well, I mean, all I do is plow snow and fix streets. I don't know what I'm going to do, but if you need help, sure, I'll be involved. So they set up first meeting, and it was basically they picked out different committees. Well, I'd never volunteered for a committee, so I volunteered for all of them. Boy, was that a mistake. So the first committee we had, and I know Roger was involved with it, was the historical committee that got together. And it was some very prestigious people in town, and Caesar Carino was there, and Ruby Razor was there. And she brought a bunch of pictures. And so we're just sitting there, and she's passing these pictures around. And she passes this picture around of this statue with her and her sister up on it. It's not a working fountain at the time, and there's the boots missing. And everybody's like, what's this? And she said, well, this used to be here. And it was broken, and during the war they donated it to the metal drive. And right then I just thought, boy, wouldn't that be great if we could bring something like that back for the bicentennial. So we had 2 years. I'm not one to jump on things real quick, and it went a while. And then we had the events committees, and so they started picking people for different events. Well, I'm a veteran, so I got also picked to plan the events for Memorial Day, and I'm still thinking, boy, wouldn't that be great if we could bring this back as a veterans memorial. But how do you get a statue made? So I started looking it up, and found out that there were like 24 left in the world. There used to be hundreds. And I actually had tried to contact people in Cuba, which I thought that might get the government looking at me a little bit, but because they have one in Havana, And there's one in Cleesborough, England, and I was talking to people on the computer to people in England, and nobody had to have one manufactured. And then looking through, and all of a sudden I find that Sandusky had one. And then I find that they had one manufactured in 1995. And the story goes that their original statue, their gentleman got mad at his wife, and instead of taking a sledgehammer to her, he went down and took it to their statue and beat their statue up and broke it into multiple pieces. So they found the Toledo Area Sculptures Guild to repair it, and then they had them make them a new one, manufacture them a new one. So many phone calls later, I get a hold of finally the gentleman that was in charge of the Parks Department for Sandusky, and I asked him, I said, how did you get this statue manufactured or whatever? And he just kind of laughed and said, it's funny you should ask me, because the gentleman that made it, I have his phone number sitting right in front of me. Apparently they're trying to get some more statues manufactured that was with their original one, but they're having a hard time because they're bare-breasted ladies, and now because it's like not politically correct, the city doesn't want to pay to have them made and placed around their statue. But he gives me his phone number, so I called and I get his wife, and he's down at the Sculptures Guild, and I told her what I wanted, and so it wasn't 2 hours later and he's calling me. Well, the gentleman's name was Jim Havens, and which Roger and he were trying to figure out if they were related somewhere down the line. But he was getting ready to retire. And lo and behold, all this going through, he decided to put his retirement on hold for 18 months to build us our statue. And so then it became trying to get funding for it and volunteers to do it. I wound up contacting Joe Rogers at the American Legion, and they wanted to then put the plaques on for all the men that were killed in action at all the different wars, all the plaques that are on it. They donated those, and contacted Home Depot and talked to them, and they donated all the materials, and contacted Bill Alexander from AK Construction, and they built all the frames and and poured it, and he got a hold of Orville Trucking, and they donated all the concrete. And then it just became, they designed it, and we started building it it was somewhere around first part of March, I guess, before we could actually break ground, because the ground when we dug, it was still 8 inches of frost in the ground. And we started digging it, but it had to go up quick because we didn't have much time, and it was just a very unique process to get it to go and watch them actually make the statue and to build the fountain and get it up and running, and the Friday before Memorial Day, just 3 days before the dedication, we finally turned it on, and it was and that Friday that we turned it on, I left and I'm like, well, at least we have a fountain. There was nothing but solid dirt over there. It was just, I mean, it had been tore up, and I came back the next morning and it was just like it looks right now. They had a contractor come in and they rolled out sod, and they planted flowers, and they put mulch in the beds, and they ran water lines and all this stuff over, and they worked. They had to have worked until midnight to get it done, but it was amazing the transition that it made from Friday when we started it up till the next morning. But so as far as the manufacture of it is, Tom was involved in a lot of this. We went up to, this was original picture of the statue and the fountain, but it didn't look like this. It didn't have the boot. And Tom, in his miracle on computers, took the boot off of the left foot and reversed it and hung it on there so that it photoshopped it in there so that we kind of had an idea of what it was going to look like.
Because because there's no photograph of the statue with the boot in its hand. It was broken off, no one knows when. And, so we put that on there so people could see.
What it was.
What do you mean, boy with a leaky boot? Well, his hand.
He's got just a hand sticking up.
Yeah,
there.
so we put that on there.
And as you can see from the modern era cars that are there, this is a very new photograph. Yeah, I don't know, those look like maybe in the 20s. So we have no idea how long the front was.
Ironically, when the boot was snapped off, it left a hole and his hand was like this.
Mm-hmm.
And in one of the articles I read, it was the boy with a turtle. Because it looked like it was a turtle head in there, not a turtle head, but a turtle shell. So it was the boy with the leaky turtle at one point. Unbeknownst to them that the boot was snapped off.
And as far as the story, Roger did lots of checking into it, and I guess there are multiple stories as to what the boy actually stands for.
Mine's the
And
best story, though.
yours is the best story, yes. But I guess depending on where in the country that they sold the statue to them is to what it represented. Like there was some sold, I guess, in New York to the fire departments, and the boy apparently was using the boot to put out fires, like a bucket brigade, you know. And so Roger's story is best for Wadsworth, I'm going to say. So we didn't know what we were going to do as far as the base of it, and the engineering department, everybody talked about it and pretty much decided that they wanted to keep it as close to original as possible. That's why the base looks like that. Now the top, we talked about it. We didn't know if the top was done, those leaf, whatever they were around the edge, we didn't know if they were done in concrete or if they were done in like bronze or whatever. And it was just going to be too much to do it, so we just squared the top off and left it.
So where was that located?
This originally was located in, I guess, what's that called? North Park, which is across from the Huntington Bank. In that apparently that island was bigger than what it is today, and.
I don't want to give it away here, Holden. I was trying to find the. Hold on. Well, I'll get back here in a second. Here, the computer wasn't acting right. I was going to go back to the one render.
It was there it is.
See, what we did originally, like Dan said, just so we could kind of get a rough idea of what it might look like. The gold leaves there on the top, we left them green, we colored them gold, we changed the statue a couple different colors, much like we did with the clock out here. I took renderings of the clock. We did a black one, a green one, just to kind of see what fit in, you know. And some of them you looked at, it's like, yeah, that's it. You know, when you got there, you just knew it was it. So we tried to do the renderings so that we could kind of see what, you know, how everything would work out.
Yeah, I'm glad that we tore those trees down. I know there's a lot of people that were upset that those trees came down, but number one, when they cut them down, they were completely hollow inside, and they had ants in them. And I think a lot of it has to do because of the ivy that's on them, and the ants can travel in the tree or whatever, but they were going to eventually fall down anyway. But it's hard enough for me to keep the inside of that thing clean, and I can't imagine all the leaf debris and everything that would have been coming out of those trees. I would have been battling it nonstop. But, you know, the way we did it, I mean, it's nice, but for some reason, everybody thinks that those rocks around the outside belong in the fountain. So every time I go, I'm pulling them out by the hundreds. They're just like lined in there. And until this year, nobody messed with it. And I think a lot of it had to do with Roger and his great idea of getting the penny drive with all the schools, all the kids, when they donated those pennies. I think that it gave them a feeling that they had a part in it, and so that they're not messing with it. Well, this past summer, 2 young girls decided to get in it, and they have broken it twice. I mean, I built in where I can easily fix it when they do something like that, and so it hasn't been expensive. It's been less than $20 to fix it when they get in it. But if anybody sees anybody in there, yell at them. and there's other things that I thought might happen to it that didn't. And I thought somebody might run by and throw a bottle of Joy in there, because I've seen fountains where they've done that before, and it just, I mean, if you want to clean downtown, that just go throw a bottle of Joy in there, because it'll just be foam everywhere. But so the first year, yeah, well, it kind of, well, I don't think we have the kind of crowd here that's going to go out and prank the fountain, but the first year, when I was going down and maintaining it and cleaning it and everything, and it was growing algae in it really bad. I thought that the water would be circulating enough that it would maintain itself, and well, now we have to add an algicide to it. But anyway, so I went and talked to him at the gentleman that sold us the pumps and everything, and got it all set up, and he said, before you clean it out, he said, go pour some bleach in it. He said, that'll kill the algae and it'll go. So I laughed. I thought it was kind of funny. I ran to the dollar store and bought 2-gallon jugs of bleach and was going to clean it the next morning and winterize it. And so in my personal car, wasn't wearing my city clothes or nothing. There's people down sitting on the benches, and I just go up there and unscrew 2 gallons of bleach and dump in that thing, and not a soul said a word about me. What's this guy doing, you know? And run back to my car, throw the jugs in there, and drive away. So I get to work the next morning, and secretary says, police department's calling down. They want you to come down there. And I go, what? And they said, somebody sabotaged the fountain. And I go, what? What'd they do? And they said, they don't know. They said there is green foam everywhere down there. Well, little did I realize that if you dump bleach in there and let that thing run all night, it's going to foam up. And it was green foam. I mean, it was cool. I thought it would have really been good for St. Patrick's Day if we could do something like that for St. Patrick's Day. And so the police are down, and they're down there filling out a report that somebody sabotaged it. And I had to go down and say, yeah, that was me. And but yeah, it's been quite an experience keeping it up and running, and just the things that have wound up in their gum, and that isn't good on it. I found that out. But so anyway, this was the rendition that they did of it, and then we went to Gibsonville to Toledo Area Sculptors Guild, and this is Jim Havens. This is the gentleman that was the president of it, that actually put his retirement on hold to manufacture it.
And he's as crazy as you look.
Oh yeah, he's
a
great fellow.
Oh,
Great fellow. I've talked to him a lot, and I almost called him up and asked him if he'd want to come down and be down here, just because he's quite an entertainer. But so the story behind getting the statue manufactured was we had to contact Sandusky, and that became Robin Lawbaugh had a lot to do with it, because Sandusky did not want us to have a statue. All the people of Sandusky thought they had the only one. And so it became, no, we don't want anybody else to have it. Well, what their Parks Department did was said, we need to repaint it. So they put it in the paper that we're going to send it back to the Toledo Area Sculptors Guild to get it repainted, and while it's there, they're going to copy it for Wadsworth. So they took it. So we arrived, and I said, my gosh, he's almost got our statue done. And he said, no, this is Sandusky's. And I said, do they know you cut this apart? And he said, they'd crap, wouldn't they, if they knew that? But he had to disassemble it in order, because it's manufactured in 18 pieces. You would think they would pour that whole thing as one, but it's not. They have to pour 18 separate pieces, and then they order the bronze, and the bronze is an alloy, and the bronze alloy that they order, they also order a welding wire, the exact same alloy. So when they get the pieces manufactured, they grind all the imperfections off of it, they polish it all up, they mount it up, they weld it together. So each piece, so they said there are no two alike, since it could be just a little tweak here or there, you know, no two are exactly alike. So he had tore that apart so that he could manufacture, you know, make a copy of it. And Tom knows a lot more about how the process is. You have to make several molds, because you have to take that, then you have to mold the outside of that, make a reverse mold. Then you take that mold, and then you have to make another mold on the inside that you can make another reverse mold of ceramic, and then you can pour it with the bronze. And we were there for pretty much the whole thing. he can tell you how.
It's a lot like if anybody's familiar with a investment casting process. It's the same thing in a little more rudimentary form. Like in an investment casting, you'll machine a mold just like they would machine a mold to make a plastic part. So you machine the mold, and then they pour wax in the mold. Well, then that wax part they dip in ceramic, and then the ceramic they heat up and melt the wax out. So now you have a negative of mold of your original part. Then they fill, then you have the ceramic, and they'll pour the metal in there, and then they break the ceramic, and that's how they'll make turbine blades for aircraft. It's a very precise process. Well, in this process, of course, you're not going to make a mold for the statue. So what Jim had to do was he had to cut the statue apart, and he took each one of the pieces, and then he poured rubber around the actual part, or like the arm, and then the rubber he could cut and take the arm out, and then he would seal the rubber back up, and then in the rubber he would pour wax.
And this is the wax.
Yeah, there's the wax. Okay, you got it right there.
Yeah.
And then so there's one of the wax arms. Okay, so that's the arm, and then as Dan was mentioning, there's nothing perfect, even with the wax. You've got some imperfections. And so what he would do was in that wax mold there, and then that piece right there came right out of the rubber. So you'll get air bubbles and things like that. And you can see in here where the hand was filled up or whatever. So all that's carved out, and that's basically hand worked down to where it's perfect. And then what he does with that is, like in this picture here, this is like it's a fabric ceramic type compound, but he wraps that around the rubber, and then this is like it's almost like a plaster of Paris type of a compound, but it's high heat resistant. And so he wrapped that around the wax, and then once that sets up, you heat that up and melt the wax out, and that's the piece. This is a piece of one of the legs that from our statue. He melted it out. So now that you have that melted out, you have a mold of the original part. And then that's the piece, that's Sandusky's statue. Now see, there's some of the pieces there. You see all the wax up there in the background that was melted out of it. Those were parts of our statue.
And that's the right leg, and so that's the one that's hollow.
Hollow.
That's the rest of it is solid.
Pretty much.
But, yeah, but this is hollow up through the leg and up through half of the body cavity and down the arm, and then he fed a cable through it, and once he got the cable through it, he just took a piece of rubber hose, small, thin, like surgical tubing, and pulled it up through. Well, when he pulled that up, he also pulled another cable with it. So there's one in. He said eventually that tubing will get bad, and you'll have to pull another piece of tubing up in there. So you already have a cable on there. So he said you just took another piece and pull another cable up in there so that you have another way to pull it up in. And so yeah, it was a unique, just really neat process.
This is the oven that they used to melt the wax out.
That's how they got the wax out.
Along with, right before they poured, in a casting process, everything has to cool very, very evenly, or you get cracks and fissures in the material. So the molds themselves were heated up to 800 or 900 degrees prior to them pouring the molten metal in. And
the whole floor is casting sand,
Yeah.
and they would bury those in the casting sand and put I think it was asbestos, but they were putting it on top to keep the heat in so that they didn't cool down enough when they poured it.
the furnace was over here, and then once they took those I call them plaster molds out of there, they buried them down in here, and they even covered them up with foil just to be sure nothing in the air got dropped down in there, because it's a foundry, it's dirty. And so this sand was heated, it's kept warm, but then back here, and it shows this a little clearer in the video we're going to show, this back here is where they heated the ingots for the material to pour in there. And
it was hot.
Yep.
Oh,
and then what they did
pulled the
here,
lid off of that, and it raised the temperature in that room 20 degrees instantly as soon as they pulled the lid
and so
off.
that's them pouring down into the molds
molds.
there. That's just we'll get back to. where we're, okay, this is later on here. Let me jump back here. Yeah, there's the wax there, and you can see where he's got, and again,
Little torch there, he's
little
using
torch
it
and his
to
knife,
melt
and he's
wax
going
and
in
put
and
in.
melting and filling in all the little fissures. So I mean, there was
A lot of time involved.
it was almost like a Michelangelo project, where you're carving and fixing that wax mold to make it as perfect as you can, because it's easier to fix the wax than it is once you get imperfections in the bronze. Now you're brazing that in. And okay, you filled it, but now that you brazed it in, now you have to, it's polished down just like a mold. Anybody that's ever been in a machine shop and done mold work, that's all hand polished back down. So he tried to make, you know, the wax as perfect as possible before he ended up doing any of the pores. So that's just, and again, the original statue, Bill Alexander was there. We were checking. I will get into some of this a little bit later. But again, in the in that molding process, and then he came back out, and then all, as Dan mentioned, all the parts were fit back together. They were all brazed back together, and then you'll go out there right now and you cannot tell. I mean, he brazed, he filled in, and then after you, again, anybody's done any welding or whatever, you do a little bit of grinding or whatever, you might open up a little pothole or something like that. So then that was filled in, and nothing was done with any kind of putty or anything else. It was all brazed.
It took over a year
Yeah.
for them to manufacture that
Yeah.
statue.
Yeah, and again, it's all, as much as it was molded, it really was more of a craftsmanship, more of an artwork of
Yeah.
him putting it back together. I mean, every piece.
His wife said when they brought it, the day that they brought it, that he'd spent every night there till 10, 11 o'clock every night for the week prior to bringing it, that he spent that much to get it just like it is.
Because see, originally, this is the first trip we went up there, when we went up there to meet him, and we even showed him, there's the rendering that I did of the layout of kind of what we wanted it to look like. And he was even taking a look at, what we were going to do, whether he could do what kind of a base, and gave us feedback on
Well, we
what.
needed to know that so that when
Right.
we manufactured the actual fountain itself, we knew how big of a base
The water and everything up to go through it. So it was a couple trips up there and back. So.
Basically, all of that fountain, everything, other than the help that we got from the people that we bought the pump from or whatever, I had to design the whole thing. Never built a fountain before. I'll build you one now, because I know there are a whole lot more about it now than I ever did before. And there was another gentleman that worked with me that worked in the street department that did a lot of construction stuff, and he helped me a lot. And it turned out we haven't had one problem.
And it's, I mean, we can even pass these around. I mean, a little bit of history. There's some of your proverbial napkin. This is the original.
That was what I drew
Yep,
that
yep.
originally. That's what I thought it should look like.
You know,
and
thought it should look like, and these are the original drawings that were sitting down around the table. An initial layout blueprint that the city did here, some sketches, and just some of that history of that part of it. But so anyway, yeah, he came down with it and brought it down here. Was here for the installation and everything else. And that's any questions on the manufacturing area?
How did you get it from Sandusky back here?
he brought it.
Yeah,
he brought it from. It actually the Toledo Area Sculptors Guild is in Gibsonburg, Ohio, which is close to Toledo, but it's actually a little closer than Toledo. And he put it in the back of his truck.
Yeah.
He drove it down.
He had it on this. This is the day they brought
Yeah, that
it.
was the day they brought it.
This is in the parking lot over here at the Marathon Station. It was on a skid, and he had it tied down, and we stood up. That's the day that they brought it here, that Friday or whatever before Memorial Day. But
Now, what kind of patina is on it?
It's just brown patina. It's brown. It's peeling. Eventually, we'll probably have to, if we want to keep it looking like that, we'll have to send it back up there and have them repatina it. It's put on with heat, and I'm going to say it's like a baked-on paint, basically.
Did Sandusky ever figure out what happened?
I don't think so. No. Now, the people there knew. I mean, the mayor and city council and the guy from the, because I know Robin went up there and she actually went in front of city council and begged and pleaded, you know, can we borrow this? And it was just that they were getting such an outcry from the community. The community thought they had the only one. They didn't realize that they didn't, but they thought, and they didn't want us to have it. They was just, you know, and we thought at that point that it was never gonna happen, you know, because if we couldn't get a hold of it. But then their parks guy says, I'll just send it down to get it fixed, and they can copy it while it's there.
We even traced it back. The original company that made these was in New York City, the foundry in New York City. And there was some paper trail, and there were actually a few molds of some of the things that they had around the country, but this wasn't one of them. So it was investigated, you know, can you go back? Because in some cases, things like that were kept. It's like, hey, we're gonna keep the mold just in case, and you know, it might be sitting in somebody's garage somewhere, but that was all researched all the way back. And so that's why we had to go through this process, because we pretty much.
We have one of the only two that are bronze. The one that they manufactured for Sandusky is bronze, and ours is. All the others were all like pot metal. That's why he could break it up with a you know, they were cheap metal from back. You know, I'm sure they didn't pour good bronze statues for, you know, and go around and try to sell them to people, you know, communities. It's whatever.
So were they able to keep the molds?
I have the molds. Yes.
Yeah,
I
we
have
do.
the molds. Yes.
So
Because
wasn't that part of the agreement?
yeah, because they had given Sandusky their molds, and they let them get destroyed.
Oh, no, what?
And he was highly upset. He said, I will never give them the copy to this again. He said he gave it to me with the promise that I would take care of it.
Because if Sandusky had those, he could have just
He could have just taken the molds and not have to go through all that to do it, you know. So I do have the molds for it.
So if something happened, we could, you know, if the boot got totally destroyed, we could
Get another one made.
Did you discover anything about the original one, where it came from and why it was here?
Well, why it was here, Roger had, you know.
I'm taking it to the grave.
Yeah.
Well, I know, right?
I mean, it was done as a Veterans Memorial way back then too, you know, a Civil War memorial as far as that goes. Yeah, but, and of course what happened to it was during the World War II and the metal drives, since it was not working and the city was making piles of metal, they just destroyed it, so.
That,
Well,
yeah,
that was
it's
World
very,
War
it's
II.
in-
That was World War II.
Every bit of scrap.
Yeah.
I lived through it. I took over a ton of paper myself to school.
Did you really?
Yeah, all you would strip the foil
Yes.
off the cigarette paper
Yeah.
and wrap it up. You would say string, you would take fats and grease, and everything to school. They were collecting everything.
Everything, yeah. So I'm sure that, I heard there was a cannon here.
There
And
was,
and the
yeah.
cannon got, you know, melted, probably melted down into another cannon, I'm assuming. I mean, so I just thought it would be really great if, you know, we could bring something like that back. And like I said, I didn't think, when I volunteered, I didn't think that I would be that involved with anything, you know, let alone wind up being the only thing that we have left that shows that we even had a bicentennial. Because every other thing that was done, every other month, was something that was just there, a picnic, you know, whatever. Over there is a plaque that states that, you know, bicentennial was in 2014. So it's the only thing that even shows that we had a bicentennial.
I'll back out of this in a second here, but these are just, the rest of the
This
pictures
is
here.
AK and
Yeah.
pour, and when we
Yeah,
poured
we'll
it.
pour, that's
when
what
we
that-
poured it. We actually have
The mold,
the forms left too, so if we have to, we can pour more. Billy's got it, I'm sure he would charge an arm and leg to do it
That's,
the second time.
Of course, that's the ceremony, the day of. That's the day of. All the celebrities and.
Yeah, all the
dignitaries
celebrities,
were
and
there.
then the gentleman, Junior, and I, that actually built it all, we
In the back.
We stuck
Photo
our
bombed
sweet
it
photo
back.
bombed it and stuck in the back of the picture, so we got,
We should have been up front, but they wouldn't move up there, so.
we got in the picture, we just got in the back.
But that's a nice, that's the day that's the Memorial Day. That's just a nice shot that day. But we'll back out and you want to show the video now?
Yeah,
sure, we'll do that. So this is a video here of the pour. Okay. Well, let's do the pour first. We got part of the dedication on there too. There's music behind it because of Jim Havens' language. We couldn't use the audio. Evidently, it must be taking a little bit longer. Yes, so this is where they're picking it up, picking the molten.
Oh, these guys are wearing heavy boots.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I mean, when that crucible, you can see through it. It's that hot. It took hours for that to get that hot. So you can imagine if they splashed it on you or whatever, you know. And I'm telling you, it was so hot in there. When we were in just jeans and t-shirts, and these guys are dressed in welded outfits because it was so, you know, in case they get splashed on. And,
You don't see any water bottles sitting around here.
No.
no.
They've got the overhead cranes and everything to pick it up, and then they'll come over and.
This actual kiln and everything that they got there, they got from Toledo University.
The heat kept those covered up. That's not just regular tin foil. That's a heavy insulated foil, and they kept that on there to keep the heat inside, so that it. And again, when you heat anything like that, all the impurities come to the top. So he's scraping off all the impurities that all come to the top, so that they're pouring the purest metal down into that they can. That's what he's doing there. That's just scraping out the. Back up there when he steps on it.
So who owns this foundry?
Toledo Area Sculptures Guild. They have
They have
all
regular
these
meetings.
meetings and
They have meetings where they teach people how to do it. It's like a society where they.
You should see the statues they have in that. Oh yeah.
So they do them all on commission? Or do
Or they each do their own.
Yes,
They
they
each do their
yeah.
own. He has several that you couldn't show on here.
See, other than controlling the flow, he's doing the same thing here with this. He's stopping any of the impurities that may have come up to the top from the time he picked it up to pour it.
Then they said after they do this, they can't even handle them until the next day. They stay that hot all night, you know. And they wanted the cool slope, so yeah. You see, he'll put on the top of that, he'll come back around there. And it looks like asbestos. I don't know if it is, but it's something to hold the heat in.
So yeah, everyone for sale.
I think he does.
I think they do. They
Smaller ones,
don't
yeah.
manufacture anything for you.
Yeah, they poured all 18 pieces were just like this. Every one of them were done this way. There wasn't any.
Yeah, you can't see it, but at the other end of the room, there had to be at least 20 of us standing there watching them pour it.
Question.
Yeah.
Did you make all the pieces out of the same crock and stuff there? Did you?
Oh no, they had to do
Several
two or three pours.
Yeah, well, it wasn't large enough for the entire statue.
And then then while they're manufacturing the other, he's over there grinding and fitting each piece, and
What
then
did you just drop in there?
it was like a little ingot of something that he put in there, and it was to keep the air bubbles out for something. I don't know. And he said it would come out.
Yeah.
And he didn't put it in all of them.
No. Some of the ones that were more solid, he put it in, and it helped dissipate. It helped dissipate the air. It would dissolve in the material, and it helped dissipate the air bubbles in the solid pieces. They wouldn't crack.
I don't think they were telling us everything that
Well.
they were doing. Because I think he said something about he would have to kill us if we do it all or something. It was just really neat to be there and watch it actually get poured. And then to wind up seeing it as the finished product and knowing that we were there when they were doing it.
you can see just now how, this was all done in real time. You can see how that is cooled off already. Remember when they first pulled it out, you couldn't tell the difference between that and the molten metal. It's cooled off, and before they pour more, they'll probably put some more ink. They'll heat ingots up in the material. It's like heating butter. If you melt a stick of butter in something that's already melted, it melts quicker. Well, it's the same thing here, so they'll put more ingots in it before it's empty, and then put it back down in the kiln to heat up.
And see, he's putting on top of that, it's like, they're like asbestos.
The whole thing.
The whole heat, so that it just cools down real slow.
Because what'll happen, if the outside cools quicker than the inside, then just like ice or the streets, expansion and contraction, you want that all to happen at the same time, because if it doesn't, it'll crack. And not just surface cracks, it could be, it might not be a vertical surface crack, it could be a horizontal crack, and basically, the lake can come apart. So all that had to do with it wasn't even just visual, a lot of it had to do with the integrity of the casting, standing up, bolted up here.
What was the cost of the actual statue, not the fountain?
$17,000. He originally had said 15, and I went to Mayor Lawbaugh and said, well, what would you say if I said he could do it for 15? Well, then I had to come back a week later because they calculated it out, and he said, I can't do it for 15, but I can do it for 17, so.
Well, they've done it for 19 too.
I'm
They
sure,
made it down.
yeah, I'm sure we got a bargain. He was just ecstatic to make us this. He put his retirement on hold for an honor. He's just a minor part now of the Toledo Area Sculpture, where he was the president, and he was going to retire. And he said, I'm not going to buy a building this.
What language you like to hear?
Yeah.
I'll take the sound off that, but this was just part of the ceremony that day. If anybody wasn't out there, we won't watch the whole thing here, but it's,
Yeah, there's a bunch of politicians speaking and stuff, so you don't
but all the plaques on the statue are the Wadsworth that were killed in action. And Roger can speak to all the research that went into this. But these were all the killed in action only from Wadsworth.
Right, now there's actually another one on the
Right.
Roger found.
Right. We added one afterwards.
Yeah, so now it's unbalanced.
Yeah, oh well. It's not like we're gonna tear the fountain down. Check it.
Jump past
It's Jack doing the Gettysburg
the,
Address.
yeah, little mouse on the computer to try to get it. That, yeah. Oh, now.
Hey, there we go.
Bypass that one.
Fast forward.
That's the best politician you got.
Yeah.
Actually, I loved his story. I thought it was quite good. Then you wrote the book too, didn't you?
Got the book.
Some more stuff. Somewhere is the dedication of it.
Yeah, well, and that's what I wanted to get with them walking up.
I had it written up.
Well, and what's happened is the computer here is, it's not picking, it's not really reacting
There
real
it is.
quick.
19 should be right.
Yeah.
There, that's where they go.
Yeah. Now, let me back up just a little bit here. Back it up here a little bit. trying to get the rose ceremony in there because.
Yeah, we got the roots. Found out the next day in the fountain.
That was?
Yep.
That was when he walked up and put the rose on it. After we left that kid, remember?
Oh,
When
yeah,
he
yeah,
walked
yeah.
up, it was,
Hank Chalky's son.
yeah. The
I
next
thought that
day,
came from Sylvia Beach, but
Yeah, there's,
story.
okay, that was the unveiling there where they pulled the,
yeah, the next day I went over and it was down in the bottom of the fountain. It was actually down in the bottom.
I got windy.
I think that was the most people I've ever seen downtown.
that was, yeah, that was, it was,
Ephraim Memorial Day.
okay, here's the ceremony with the rose. And I don't know if you know Pam Chalky from the high school, this is her son. A lot of the kids dressed up for the bicentennial. They had outfits through the whole year that they helped us out with.
And that boy did not want to do this.
No, no, he did
I had
not.
to talk to him over and over again and say, you don't have to say anything, just look
And
serious.
that's the first water flowing there.
The library will be closing in 30 minutes at 9 o'clock.
But anyway, there was, you know, I'll try to get through the story, but I was coming over to the library one, it was only 4 or 5 days after this, and there was a young mother out here, and she had kids 4, 5, 6 years old, and she had just finished reading them all the names, you know, on the plaques. And she told those kids that she did that because she goes, we're not from Wadsworth. She goes, I don't know any of the people on the plaque. She goes, but you're going to school with all these people that are on here, and you need to know what those people did for you. And it was just neat to see her telling those little kids what this memorial was about. I mean, obviously it got to me, but it was just really neat. And like I said, she wasn't from Wadsworth. She had nothing to do with it, but she was telling those, reading the names and telling those kids that you're in school. You know, you've got to be in school with people from Wadsworth here whose relatives are on here, and we're walking around here today enjoying this because of what these people did. That was just really cool to see that somebody really got and understood what this was all about. That was it.
Oh, that looks popular.
Yeah, that's a picture of Broad Street right now.
76.
Yeah.
We actually got,
Yeah.
I actually got an article was written in America's Civil War magazine about it, and I thought that was pretty good.
That was, yeah, the one,
Yeah, it was, they're talking about, where is it? There it is. The boy's boot leaks again. At some point in the late 1800s, the town of Wadsworth, Ohio erected a statue to commemorate the Civil War. A boy toting water in a leaky boot to thirsty soldiers. But the soldiers didn't need water as much as the Allies in World War II needed metal, and the boy and his boot were melted down to serve a more practical purpose than municipal artwork. 70 years later, the town got its boy back. A community effort spearheaded by the Wadsworth Bicentennial Committee raised about $25,000 to recast the boy and build a replica of the fountain where he once stood. 4-foot-tall statue was dedicated on Memorial Day, and it's pretty good. It's in
it was in the Civil War, National Civil War magazine that they picked up that we did that. So yeah.
Any questions? Anything?
What was the actual cost, Dan, do you know?
Well, the statue itself was $17,000, but like, you know, it got miscellaneous stuff. The pump was another $800. The nozzles for the fountain, the original one, the plaques were manufactured and donated though by the American Legion. I don't think they cost the city anything. They cost anything. The nozzles that we decided that just more than the original one, the only feature of the fountain was the boot leaking water. And I have a feeling that back then, they didn't even have a pump. They used just city water to come through, and it probably overflowed and went, just went away. Where we recycle our water, we have it enclosed, and so we added more features with nozzles around that spray the water up inside or whatever. The nozzles, they're not cheap. And of course, I thought they might get stolen, so I have a whole nother set in case some get stolen.
Well, the one thing, the day that they came out to pour the concrete, the company that came out, they came out and they looked around, and I mean, they knew they were coming to do a pour for a statue. They found out what they were doing, and they said, "We can't charge you for this."
Well, I had gone around and I had gotten Home Depot, AK Construction, which he got Oroville Trucking to donate all the concrete. The lighting that was out there, Wolf Brothers, when we went to do the lighting and they found out what it was for, they donated the lights. They've replaced them already because they started to peel and they go, "Oh, those things shouldn't have been peeling," so they replaced the lights already. I mean, the majority of it, everything was donated. You wouldn't believe how much Home Depot donated. They gave us an open end up there. We would go up there and fill a shopping cart full of whatever and go up and they would write it down and say, "See you," and out the door we'd go. So they wrote off thousands and thousands of dollars.
Yeah,
All the wood that went into the forms, all the piping, all the glues, the bolts, anything we needed, we went up there, they donated it all.
Other than all the the in-kind donation that the City of Wadsworth did. I mean, all the excavation, the engineering work, and everything else.
Well, they allowed us to do
Right.
that on city.
Right.
That was, at first we were gonna try doing it with volunteers and after hours, and it was gonna be overwhelming. There was no way we were going to be able to do it in the time allotted, only because we had such a cold winter and the ground was frozen. We had planned on starting to dig in January, and it was into March, and we were digging, like I said, still 8 inches of frost in the ground to get it out.
But if anybody was down when we took the time capsule out, we waited until March to try and take that time capsule out, and still went through, 30-some inches of frost to break it up. I mean,
it was a cold winter.
Yeah, it was really, it even delayed us getting the time capsule out of the ground that year, so.
But I worked on that so many hours, it was unbelievable. But it was bittersweet, because on Friday before Memorial Day, we fired it up for the first time, and it worked.
And it leaked.
And the boot leaked, and what a bummer that was. But anyway, it was the same day I found out my father had cancer, and he passed away 2 months later. And it was kind of bittersweet day,
But some of the extra money we had left over from the bicentennial went to the city to a fund to help maintain it.
Yes, and I believe we have about $800 left in the fund. I was told, I don't think it's enough to send it out and get it repainted. Everything that I have put into this has come from the money that I take out of it when I clean it. I've kept, and I probably have still $20-some. I just keep track of how much I take out. It's surprising, you only get $1, $2, $3 out every couple, 3 weeks when I do it, but people are throwing coins in there. And then every time that something would break or whatever, I just take that money and goes back. So it's like self-sufficient. If I gotta clean it out with the bleach or whatever, I just take the money out of that, and I haven't had to use a penny of it to, because people keep throwing it in. I thought it was ironic the first time I cleaned the money out of there, there was a Japanese quarter in there. And I thought that's kind of some Japanese guy threw a coin in there, Veterans Memorial. Then I come to find out it was somebody in the city. Their son teaches in Japan, and so he had sent a coin over to throw. And I said, "Well, here, you might want to give this back to him because I don't think we want it." There's some people that probably wouldn't think that's appropriate,
Especially the World War II vets.
Yeah.
Any other questions or?
Yeah, you'll see me out there, like cleaning and polishing about once a month. I clean it all out. I've maintained it.
Yeah, we just, what Dan originally did, you've done a couple of presentations. He did
Yeah.
one for the Lions group here a while back,
Did one.
and the River Styx Historical Society, I know he did. But and again, it's just, just a lot of those little stories that go along with it that you don't, you wouldn't necessarily know.
I heard you talk about Dove soap or Indian on the square in Lodi. It quite often gets
Does it?
so
Does
bad.
it? I only thought of that because I was in New York City in 1976 during the country's bicentennial celebration, and I was in, I'm trying to think of the name of the park, but they have a multiple layer fountain that's like, looks like a type of Christmas tree where this layer drops into this layer and whatever, and somebody had taken a bottle of Dove soap and thrown in it, and you couldn't see it. It was this huge foam pit, and these kids were having a ball because they would run into it and just disappear. They would go, they'd leave like a little opening, and I'm going, I can see somebody like running straight into that fountain, and I'm going, man, how are they gonna clean this up? But you know what? The area was really clean, and I'm thinking that it happens a lot, so.
Bob, you had a question?
No, I just wanted to point you that.
Okay.
Had his hand up.
Yeah, so nobody's done it yet, but, I have a feeling it's coming.
Could you send some students from Cloverleaf over and
Yeah, and so as we were designing it and building it, we tried to build in fail-safe things with the nozzles that were in there. We built in a place that'll break, and it's very easily replaced. It's just a little plastic tube about that long, so it'll break off. As long as they don't steal the nozzles to replace them, all I got to replace is the plastic tubes that are in it. And with the lights that are on there, the electric department designed them. They've been kicked over and broke off so many times. It's a 15-cent item that goes in there. We built in things into it because you know that something's going to happen. Somebody's going to try to do something to it. You can't have anything nice. I don't know what they have. But it's been.
Is this being recorded?
Is
this gonna get edited?
I hope.
Yeah, we don't want these ideas.
Ideas,
Just one other comment that I have, just my observation. We have one statue out of 24 in the world. And as far as I'm concerned, we do not take advantage of that notoriety. It is on some of the websites on roadside things, found through the nation, and they have this listed as that. We call attention to it once a year at Memorial Day when we turn it on. And it just blows my mind that we don't use that as any kind of icon. We have the gazebo that we're known for, but guess what? Every other community in Medina County has a gazebo. We have one of them. This is 1 out of 24. Some are in the UK, a couple of them are in Ohio, some throughout the United States, I don't know where else, Canada.
Cuba.
And Cuba. And yet we don't take advantage of that to bring that to the attention. And ironically, we just redesigned the letterhead and that sort of thing for downtown Wadsworth. Everything's in there but the boy with the leaky boot. I suggested it, but it just didn't fit into the scheme. We got the clock in that wasn't even up yet. But yeah, I just think it's a shame that we're not bringing more attention to it. With all the work that went into it, the kids that raised the money in Wadsworth School.
How much did you get? You got like $8,000 in pennies.
Oh, it was. And
We're out the penny machine at First Merit Bank.
there was a penny run on all the banks, and people were in panic form. All these parents ran out to try to get pennies because, we had competition at Franklin. Just at Franklin, the smallest school in Wadsworth, we raised over $2,000 in pennies. Now, they didn't like me when I came in with all these 5-gallon buckets of pennies down to the field.
And that's what people were doing. I was there. You'd see people just pulling up and you're loading just big buckets of pennies out, yeah. And poor Debbie Reeves in it. Yeah.
But again, yeah, I think it was like you say, 6, 7.
I think it was 8,
Yeah,
over
yeah.
$8,000, just in pennies.
The school's part to raise 2,000, and we raised close to 8,
Yeah.
because they all got into it, and it was
And I
just,
said, I think that's a good thing, because those kids feel like they, you know,
They did.
they have a part of it.
They contributed to it,
They
right.
contributed to it.
And there was some talk early on about the, whether we changed the metal that we used for it so that the pennies could literally go in the pot. But that a penny's not 100%, even if you did it totally out of copper, you know, penny's not 100% copper. So that there was some talk originally about using the pennies that were donated to actually go into some of the molten metal. But the pennies weren't, they really weren't pure enough to use, and you couldn't find, and if he would have used the metal that the pennies were out of, the statue wouldn't have had the physical integrity that it does. So we weren't able to, you know, melt the pennies down.
Melt the pennies.
Right. So that, the fact that it's.
That's a small minor detail.
The whole concept was we were making a kind of copper or bronze, and they brought the pennies in that matched, you know, the metal, at least the color, because modern pennies have mostly aluminum in them. You know, that's why they're so lightweight. So, and we didn't want to ask everybody to bring in the weedy pennies. That may have cost people out of their collections, but anyway, yeah, the whole concept was you're bringing in the copper look, and you tell the kids, oh, this is going to be the same color as the statue. So that's why it was a penny drive. And you know what? People give up pennies. You see them in the parking lots everywhere. They throw them away. But when they bring them in mass, oh boy, it build up. Yeah, my car headed to town was like that. He's in the boot of the truck, or in the car. But
Did you visit different banks so they all could count?
now the
some?
only coin counter or coin bagger was down here at the old Citizens Bank. So everybody streamed in there, and it just blew up their machine. And it went out of commission, and then they had one up the north end, and they just had big signs up, do not enter. But it was funny because, you know, we got, parents were just in a panic, and they were going to all the banks, and all the banks were out of pennies. But they won because the kid said, oh, Mom, can I have 50 pennies? Well, we had to run on the bank, and it was crazy, but it was fun. And all the kids got to come down and see it, and it was worth the effort. I'm sure they'll remember that the rest of their lives. And hopefully we'll never have a boy with a leaky turtle over there.
And there are a couple people in the city that have taken it upon themselves to call me at least once a week and say, there's a problem with the fountain. And I'll go, what? What's wrong? They said, the boot's leaking. So now I know when Dan Rosberg calls that it's because he wants to bust my chops about the boy with the leaky boot. If you see me out there, blow the horn, because I'll be out cleaning him at least once a month or every couple weeks. But
All right, well, thank you, guys.